Hello, you are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. I'm Chris, and I'm joined by my good friend Mark.
Hey, everybody.
No Clem today because he's lost his voice, and of course, dear listener, that joke writes itself. But he's not here today, but this is possibly the most exciting episode of the year so far. We are here to talk about Kings of War Champions, and joining us today are Andy.
Hello, how are you doing?
And Rob Burman, as I live and breathe.
Hello, how's it going?
So before we very well, thank you very much. So before we started recording, Rob, I told you I'd prepared all of two, questions for you.
That's professional for you, I think. Actually,
exactly, doubling up. Yes, and the first one is, Rob, do you not understand what quit means?
Well, I do. Ronnie probably doesn't. I think it's a bit like in The Sopranos. You know, when he's like, "They keep dragging me back in."
I think we get plenty of impressions this episode. This is excellent. And was it because I think at the time because you were probably a year and a half ago, you were on the pod to tell us all about Grogger, and I think you mentioned to us that when you handed in your notice, Ronnie kind of said to you, "You know what, kid, you're going to miss all this." And I think you probably thought at the time, "Am I?" But was there an element of that?
I think. Well, I suppose in all fairness, it's hard to sort of switch off completely, and all the stuff that I enjoyed when I was working in Mantic, writing the lore and getting involved with sort of design and that sort of thing. That doesn't just switch off. You don't switch off a light and it all goes off. So yeah, I think when there's been opportunities to do little bits and bobs, and obviously I was writing those short stories and that sort of thing. And then this kind of opportunity came up and it was something a bit different. I thought, well, yeah, it sounds really exciting. So I thought I'd give it a go.
I want to say, Rob, as well, I've really missed your writing. The level of wit you get across, and just I really, really enjoy the fun you get into it, even when it's with a character like Grogger. Yes, if you remember, you did your Maison Labs episodes. I really enjoyed that, so I'm very glad you're back. Super.
Thanks.
And Andy, thank you so much for coming back on the pod. It's been too long.
It has, but thank you very much for the invite.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And I think we've got you on at a time, obviously. Halo is... I saw, actually, this week, I saw a list of, the most popular games for this year. And I think Halo was number 4 on the list, which is extraordinary stuff, really.
There was a list kicking about, I think, from the Gamma trade show, which was just this last week. And I think it was quarter 4's results, and I think Halo was number 6. But bearing in mind, in that 3-month period, Halo was only available for 6 weeks. It was a really encouraging chart to see. It's nice to see Mantic Games up there with some of the more established ones, shall we say?
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, you've always had. To my money, you've always had, literally to my money because I buy all these games, but you've always had such good rule sets, such fair games. And to me, it's just a question of taking the amazing Dead Zone rules and getting a large audience to give it a go. So more people can go, wow, this really is amazing.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, having cool models, having cool rules sometimes just isn't enough on its own. And it's when the planets align and we all kind of pull together and everybody's kind of singing from the same hymn sheet and it seems to work, you get these kind of moments. And obviously with a license like Halo that is very much people are aware of, it comes with its own attention as well. And that's allowed us to get in front of people that maybe we couldn't necessarily with something like Dead Zone. And it's a fantastic game. The team have done a fantastic job of creating it. The models are great. The future's really rich as well. I mean, obviously, I'm privileged enough to see what's coming right up until probably the end of the year. There's some exciting stuff coming that people haven't seen or heard of yet, and there's a lot to be excited about.
Fantastic. I mean, from my perspective, The Walking Dead, is pretty. It's been around for a while now. The Mantic game, for my money, that was an incredible game. Everything about it, I thought Mantic did really well. What do you think the difference is between that and the pop? Halo's just absolutely exploded. Do you think there's anything Mantic have done differently?
I wouldn't say necessarily done hugely differently. I think that The Walking Dead was the game that got me into Mantic Games. So I think in terms of reaching out to people that wouldn't ordinarily see Mantic products. The Walking Dead certainly did that, because I'm living proof that was the case. But I think one of the differences is with the Walking Dead versus Halo is the Walking Dead was a Kickstarter, and not everybody is kind of fond of Kickstarter. The Halo, you could pre-order it and it would arrive. I think there was a very easy entry point with Halo versus maybe where Walking Dead was. And I think there is an element with Halo which bridges that gap between board game accessibility and miniatures game tactics that I think that maybe even Walking Dead didn't have as well. So I think it's maybe, plus we've also got to remember as well, I mean, that's probably going back 8 years ago or something now that Walking Dead came out. I think the tabletop market, the tabletop gaming market is in a different position. More people are kind of picking up tabletop games and analog games rather than digital ones. And I just think the audience is in a different place now as well. So I think, again, it's a case of having the right product at the right time with the right license, and the stars aligning, and a little bit of good luck as well.
Amazing. Fantastic. I mean, I'll be honest, I could talk to you about that all day, but I think the dear listener will like to hear something about Kings of War Champions. So, guys, Kings of War Champions, this is, so me and Mark have been, and many other people have been sort of speculating. Now, my sort of idea of Kings of War Champions is you go to a Kings of War tournament, and the Friday night before, you've got your army box, and you take out your hero models, your individually based models, and your monster models, and you can play a quick fun game. How close are we to sort of the being, correct?
You're about, I would say, about 10% of the way there. You can absolutely play this on a Friday night, and you can absolutely have a quick fun game. But it is its own thing. This is not necessarily sort of Kings of War aimed at Kings of War players. This is a game set in the world of Kings of War, aimed at those people for whom Kings of War maybe is a step too far, or maybe they find it difficult to get into. So
is this so if we set Vanguard to a side, I'm assuming it's not as complicated and crunchy as Vanguard is, as much as people love Vanguard. So is it sitting between Kings of War? So is it the entry game, and then the next one is Ambush? Is that fair to say?
I mean, feel free to jump in, Rob, on this as well, because obviously Rob is the genius that's designed this as well. I would say you could move up to Ambush from this. However, you could move straight up to Kings of War as well. It's Ambush adjacent. And I think as we explain more about it, that will become more clear.
Amazing. So why don't you hit us with the sales pitch, and then me and Mark can get very excited. Okay, then.
So Kings of War Champions is very much a rank and flank fantasy war game, and it is set in the world of Panathor, hence the Kings of War part of this as well. But the game really is more about those elite kind of, those heroes, the champions, so to speak, and their companies, their little band of brothers that they bring with them into battle. So we're talking small numbers of models on a tabletop. We're talking fast playing, smaller table size, and the idea being that you buy a box of, you buy a champion and you buy its company that comes with it, and you play that. So basically, you build it a certain way. It doesn't expand out from that. You basically you play whatever is in that box, and then to expand your game from that point onwards, you can then jump in and buy other boxes as well. So the idea is rather than expanding a certain army, you will buy a different box, and that will give you a different play style, and it will give you different abilities, and it will give you an opportunity to play in a different way.
So sorry, I need to talk over you. So more than the faction, it's the leader, the heroes, the key to it, right?
Yeah, hence the Kings of War Champions. It's really about the champion. It's about what they bring to the table, what they bring to their company. They have some special abilities which make them play very different to any other champion in the game, and you will you'll be able to build them, paint them, and play them quite quickly. So it's not something that you have to plan sort of 6 months out to get an army to the table. You'll be getting these up and running within a weekend or so. And then the idea is that basically you can play through the lots of different missions in the rule book. some of them with a very narrative slant as well, and you will grow to love your champion and your hero and the story that surrounds them. And then you'll then go on, and next month a new release comes out, and you'll decide, I want to play a different way. I'll buy the new box, and I'll buy a new faction, or I'll buy a new company, so to speak, and we'll grow it that way.
So the heroes are named characters, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, all the heroes are named characters, so they will obviously be part of the Kings of War universe. They'll have a future. They'll have a backstory, and the game will be sort of heavily influenced about what they bring to the table. Would you agree with that, Rob? Fair to say?
Yeah, so I think from my point of view, this is sort of Champions is sort of like dipping your toe in rank and flank. So say if you've looked at rank and flank games before and just sort of been put off by the amount of models you need, the amount of time, the amount of space as well, all this sort of stuff, all the terrain you need. What Champions does is it sort of answers a lot of those questions, that sort of like gives you an opportunity to play a rank and flank game, because yes, you have got your champion, but typically they will be accompanied by two units of troops. Maybe a couple of them have like one kind of war machine or something like that. So it actually gives you a sort of an opportunity to do things like flank charges, rolling more dice, all that kind of stuff. But it's not like you mentioned, Vanguard. It's sort of not a replacement for Vanguard. It's not a skirmish game. It is a rank and flank game, but the size has just been reduced, quite a small size. I think one of the big things from my point of view is, again, I mentioned space, is just sort of like, if you want to play a game of Kings of War, it's just huge. You want a 6 foot by 4 foot playing area, and most people don't have that. So actually, one of the things we did straight away was we reduced the game mat size, so it'll fit on like an actual kind of a coffee table. So the actual playing area is, and I'm trying to look up because I can never remember how big it is. It's 42 inches by 24 inches, so it's a lot smaller than what it would normally be.
Yeah, I think one of the ways I've kind of explained it is, if you love the idea of rank and flank gaming, but all of the reason Kings of War puts you off in terms of it's going to take me 12 months to get an army together, I don't want to paint that many models, I don't have that long in time to play it, I don't have a table big enough, all of those reasons that Kings of War might not be for you are all solved with Kings of War Champions.
So is this kind of going after the board game market a little bit?
It's still very much a rank and flank miniatures war game, but just on a smaller scale and focused very much on the accessibility side of things. Because for a lot of people, building your first army for Kings of War, and even for Ambush, to be fair, can be a little bit daunting, a little bit of analysis paralysis. What am I building? Should I build it this way? What if this is not the most optimum way to build my army? What if this is a unit I won't ever use again? And Champions just removes all of those barriers and gets you to get models on the table and playing really quickly.
So it's be multi-bases. Everything comes in the box. So if you get a hero, let's say, for example, you've got a Basilian hero, Paladin or something, let's say as an imaginary example. So are you going to get everything in the box, including multi-bases, cards, or whatever else you might need to do that hero?
Yeah, you absolutely will. So when you buy a company box, for example, because we will have a 2-player starter set coming at launch, but if you buy a company box and that's where you want to get started, all of the models that you need will be in there. There'll be instructions on how to build them. There will be the cards to allow you to actually play them, which have the stats on them. So you'll have those stat cards in front of you. There'll be a card in the box which basically gives you the special abilities of your champion, and everything you'll need to play that company, if you like, with all of the bases will come inside that box. And we're absolutely kind of sort of trying to encourage that multi-basing as well, because I think it's a really cool part of Kings of War that we maybe don't always talk about enough, and I think this gives us an opportunity. Think of it like the amount of models you're getting in this box is still not insignificant. We're probably still talking somewhere between 25, 30 models, something like that per company. But it's a perfect little hobby project. It's a little kind of diorama project to put them together on their multi-bases and get them on the table.
Rob?
Yeah, I was going to say as well as the cards that you get, there's also one of the big things we really wanted to do with this, and the reason why it's Champions is there's a little bit of lore about kind of each champion, so you get a little bit of background, and also all their units are named as well, and they get a little bit of background. So say for example the ogres, you'll find out about the leader, and then also each unit has a couple of like a paragraph or so about that. And I think that's one of the big things. We sort of see this as the starting point where you're getting introduced to these characters in the rule book, and then their stories will be told throughout. Well, I mean, Andy can probably add this, but like campaigns or, obviously the Winged Hussar stuff as well. So some of them are already being integrated into future Winged Hussar stories. And I think that was, I guess, one of the things that was the appeal for this one is we want people to get really attached to these characters and see what happens to them. And, and that's so you can do that really nicely at this scale where you sort of zoom in to a smaller battle rather than sort of a big Kings of War thing where you've got maybe, you might be running 4 heroes or something like that. Instead, this is more zoomed in so you can get to know these characters and their abilities sort of represent a bit about their lore as well.
I think that to some extent the competitive gamers for Kings of War have been a bit of an echo chamber where I think there's sort of several hundred tournament gamers that love Kings of War because it's so balanced and competitive, but I think they've been a bit of an echo chamber in as much as I think they've been telling each other, oh, no one cares about the lore of Panathor, which is completely untrue. But I think they've kind of, because they're so sort of loud and sort of present, I think there's an awful lot of basement gamers who are really interested in the lore who don't get a say, if that makes sense. So I'm really glad there's more lore.
I think that's totally true, and I think Rob's point is really, really valid. It's that Kings of War does have a fantastic lore and background, and there's some fantastic stories have been told. And I think sometimes those amazing heroes that appear in the stories don't always appear on the tabletop. And this is a way for us to really start to bring some of those heroes to the forefront, not only in the game, but also in the world of Panathor and in the background stories and lore, and start to bring them to life and to give us a progressing story and what happens to these champions beyond where they are now and what happens to them in the future, and how do we shape that through community involvement. And it's a really exciting time.
I think as well, actually, sorry to jump in, but I was going to say about the actual champions, even the miniatures themselves, it was really important to make sure they were as characterful as possible. So you might fall in love with a particular champion, obviously the goblin one, and then that'll encourage you then to go on and actually do that army. So it's that sort of element that you see these characters, you think, wow, they're really cool, and then because, like Andy was saying earlier on, it's probably around 20 to 25 miniatures. It's not too big a project to then sort of take them on because you like a particular model. So and that was really important. I think even from the sculpting stage, the sculpt, I guess it would have been Luigi, was sent, or even from the concept artwork stage, they were all sent the background for each of these characters so they could try and integrate that into their actual miniatures. So that was important to really give them a lot of character, which will then kind of hopefully be on the game on the tabletop as well when you actually play.
Excellent. The Goblin one has got to be Grogger. You don't have to answer that, but surely it's Grogger. So,
well, no, it isn't. I will tell you, it's not. I think the problem with Grogger is he's too big. He's the king, isn't he? So he's not the one. These are
spoiler alert for the Ascent of a Goblin King.
Well, these are more like.
It is called Ascent of the Goblin King, but still.
Yeah, so he hasn't ascended. Yeah, he has. Has he ascended? Who knows?
He's the way up the spiral staircase of Goblin politics.
Ready for the plateau of the Goblin King and the next one. So he just kind of keeps going. But I think. You've maybe lost my point now, Chris. I can't remember what I was talking about. But yeah, anyway.
Well, I do. So, guys, in terms of... So, it sounds like this is very much trying to grab new players into the Panathor world, really, right? And once people have done their Champions Force, maybe I'll have a go at Ambush. Once you're that invested, maybe I'll have a go at Ambush. Maybe I'll have a go at Full Fat Kings of War. I guess that's the idea, right?
Yeah, because... you will be able to take that. You'll be able to take your Champions company, and you will be able to add to it and play small scale Kings of War games in Ambush. You will be able to then grow that on into a full scale army. That the champions that we have in Champions will be available to be used in Kings of War as well in the full scale game. But I think it's around lowering that barrier to entry. It's about making it a game that can stand alone as a game. It's not Kings of War Light, for example. This is its own thing, and whilst it shares a lot of sort of heritage and a lot of the rules structure from Kings of War, which makes that journey into Ambush and into full-scale Kings of War much easier, it has its own flavour of things which make it feel like its own game as well. And I think Rob's done a fantastic job of bridging that gap, really, so that it doesn't feel unfamiliar to step up in the future, but it's also really, really fun and interesting to play on its own.
Mark?
There's nothing wrong with people just playing this entire, they could just stick and just play Champions. There's no, I guess it's not like always like pushing them up to Kings of War. Actually, it is like you were saying, Chris, about introducing them to the world, and actually they may play Champions and then go on to something like Dungeon Saga. It's not always just getting them onto that bigger and bigger games. Actually, it might be that you like Champions, you've really enjoyed it, and instead of moving up, you'll be like, actually, like Andy was saying earlier on, I'm going to try a different company now, a different faction, to see how they play, because they all do play differently thanks to the Champions, and also everyone's got special faction rules as well. So yeah, if you want, just stick to Champions and stay there.
So I was just, we're in a good spot right now to kind of run down a bunch of my questions here. So I just thought I would jump in real quick and kind of blow through them. So you can go ahead and play Champions and not play Kings of War at all?
Absolutely, yeah. So Champion, if everybody takes one thing away from this kind of interview thing today, Champions, Kings of War Champions is its own game. You can, if you want to, in the future, add to what you have and go on and play Kings of War, but Kings of War Champions is its own thing, and there will be some people for whom they only ever play Kings of War Champions because of its accessibility, it's how quickly you can get an army to the table size, how fast the games are, the types of gameplay modes in terms of the scenarios, the fact that each unit feels a little bit different and they want to go down that sort of collectible route of collecting all of the different releases and the different factions and the different champions over time. For some people, this will be where their Kings of War journey will start and end. And some people will, like Rob says, go on and play Dungeon Saga and go on and play sort of full-scale Kings of War and things in the future. But this is designed to be its own game. This is not necessarily a kind of like a stepping-on point, if you like.
So are you worried about splitting the Kings of War community? Or, I mean, it's
not really. I mean, I think people who have big armies and who enjoy big rank and flank scale army gaming already sort of enjoy that kind of game. And I think there are some people for whom they admire those big armies and the big scale war games, but just don't have the time, they don't have the commitment, the time commitment available to actually get in there and build a full 2,000 or 2,400 point army, or maybe don't want to kind of start down that journey and think it's going to take me 12 months to get everything painted and I'll probably sort of, I don't want to make the wrong decision or whatever reason it is that Kings of War, all rank and flank gaming can be a barrier. This will kind of scratch that itch for them. They will definitely be able to feel like they are playing Kings of War or playing rank and flank mass battle gaming, but on a much smaller and much more accessible scale.
Well, you've definitely got my interest. So is there, now you mentioned multi-bases, is there going to be minimum model count on there, or are you putting up full units?
No, it's everything you need to play the game will be inside the box. It's entirely up to you how you want to build them. It's kind of like a fixed list. So when you open a box, you build the models the way they're intended to be played, and so if you want to put less models on a base and you want to put some cool base and materials on them, go ahead and do that and use those few extra models elsewhere if you want. But you will, like, everything you need is in that box.
Yeah, it's worth saying as well, actually, that each sort of unit, it describes what their unit base is. So it's not sort of like, infantry or heavy infantry or anything like that, you'll just get in the description, it'll just sort of say, this is that unit's base size. So as long as you stick to that, you can sort of do whatever you want with the modelling opportunities, which is kind of the beauty of multi-basing.
Yeah, and we absolutely encourage it as well. We want to see people making their champions warbands their own, making them look cool, putting some cool bits of multi-basing on there as well, so we can actually see them and kind of, make it feel like yours. Don't make it look like everybody else's.
So are we getting new models, or are we pulling stuff from the current Kings of War line?
Yes to both of those things. So every champion is an absolutely brand new model, and I would go out on a limb to say they are probably the best models we have ever made in Mantic. I've got one of them sitting on my desk at the moment, and I absolutely love it. So every champion will be an absolutely brand new sculpt, brand new model, and then the majority of models in the boxes for the units will be the best of our plastics, so the more recent stuff, the latest stuff that we've been producing, and then there are also some new plastics coming as well. As an example, the Basilean Cavalry, we're going to be having some plastic Basilean Cavalry in this box as well, which will then go on and be available in Kings of War, but you'll see them for the first time in Champions.
Oh, there you go. That's some breaking news here. So very, very cool. So, Rob, are there points in the game, or you're just taking it out of the box and I'm going to invoke Games Workshop Spearhead kind of type of thing?
I guess that was, that's a good comparison, actually. I think at the minute there aren't points, just because we want people to, like Andy's been saying, is kind of get it out of the box, build it, and then bosh, you're sort of ready to go. The way I look at it, this is the sort of game I want to play with my kids. I've got two boys, they're almost 11 and 13, and for them, sometimes they just want to get out, build the model. They choose the cool models, they want to get them and build them and then start playing with them. They don't want to sort of get stuck into the minutiae of, points and list building. So I think, that was one of the big elements, really, is that we sort of wanted to, I guess, not take out the frustrations of something like Kings of War, but just sort of take out some of those stumbling blocks because I think Andy mentioned earlier on, like analysis paralysis, and that's a good comparison, that sometimes you might get an army, and yes, you might get the starter set, but then it's like, well, what do I do here? What do I need? And you're sort of looking at all the stats, and you might not be sure, and it's like, well, okay, well, how many hordes of goblin rabble do I need? Obviously, you need 3, but you might be sort of like, oh, okay, well, how many minces do I need, or are minces any good? So I think that was one of the things of this one, is actually make it as easy as possible to get in and start playing. Hopefully in. Someone mentioned to me, I can't remember who it was, like the Christmas Day test is, say if you get your Scale Extric or your train set, something like that, the idea is you get it on Christmas morning, you open it, and by Christmas afternoon, you're actually playing it. I think, actually, for Champions, this is the closest, in my opinion anyway, rank and flank game has come to actually passing that Christmas Day test. You could get it on the Christmas morning, you could build your models, stick them down to the multi-base with a bit of blue tack or something like that, and then start playing. I think that's a big thing for me. It's just about making it super easy to play. You could be playing it. I mean, it even comes with the sort of like cardboard terrain that you need as well. So because that's another thing, I guess, sometimes you get these games and then you need a load of extra stuff. You need the playing mat, you need the terrain, you need all this other stuff. So I think generally this might be the best 2-player set I've seen for definitely for a rank and flank game.
This is Ronnie Renton, and you are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
This is Fred, reminding you to visit the Kings of War forum, kowforum.com. No ads, no commercials. That's kowforum.com.
Yeah, just building on what you were saying there, Rob, before we go into details with the 2-player set and things, I think the way I would liken it is that I think sometimes with bigger scale war games, you feel like you need to know enough about the game and how it plays before you start building your first army, because you're like, I don't want to make any mistakes. I don't want to spend money on an army and build it the wrong way, if you like. And with Champions, you can't do that. You build it how it's intended. The boxes are kind of internally balanced against themselves. And so the idea is you can learn to play with the models you've built rather than just actually trying to kind of like, I need to learn this game and understand how it works before I make a choice of how my army's going to kind of look. So I think that kind of, I think that is a big proponent of it.
Well, I'm the king of small point gaming, so this sounds fantastic. I'm just absolutely vibrating here, so in my seat. But Rob, go ahead.
No, I would say, that small size gaming is great. This for me personally, I've had a long history of playing Kings of War. Actually, I would rather now get to the point where I'd rather play a game of Champions than a big game of Kings of War, just because it is a lot of fun. It is that space size. It doesn't take long to get it out of the box and actually start playing. And my boys are more interested in playing something like this than a big game. So I think this really sort of treads that line between it being a skirmish game like Vanguard and then actually full Kings of War. So it sits in a real nice place for me. And the fact I can do it on the dining room table is great because I just haven't got the space for a big game.
Yeah. So building on what Rob was saying about the kind of a Christmas Day testing thing, the idea with the starter box is that you really do get everything that you need inside it to enable two people to get playing Kings of War Champions. And so inside that core box, there'll be two armies in there. There'll be two companies, if you like. One of them will be. I'm just looking at the list here, so I can make sure I don't give you any information that I don't. So one of them is the Basilean faction. With the champion that is called Alanis Solustris, and she will come with her band. The other one is the names just escape me now.
The Bloody Cardinal.
Yeah, the Bloody Cardinal. Yeah, from the Forces of the Abyss.
Yeah.
So those are the two factions that you get inside the starter box. The starter box is going to be called Faith and Fury. You'll get the full rule book in there as well. So the rule book is looking absolutely beautiful. There's all of the rules that you need to play the game in there. There is background stories for each of the different champions that we're going to be releasing this year, and I won't spoil any of the information about who the ones are just yet. But you'll be able to see when you get the book, like what the roadmap looks like a little bit of who the other champions are going to be. So there's a good amount of background lore. There is scenarios are all in there as well to be able to play. So everything that you need rules-wise is all in that one book. There is assembly guides, so there's instructions to be able to build the models to show you exactly how to put them together. There's tokens. There's 2 sheets of punchboard tokens in there as well. So for all the different tokens that you need. And when I say all the different tokens, there's things like, yourself in Kings of War, there's little things like sort of, line of sight markers and things like that. Just to be able to see little corner pieces to mark your base before you move it. So it's not like this game is token heavy. It's more about sort of usable things. There's dice inside there as well. So these are not sort of unique dice or anything to the game. They're just normal dice. They're D6 for this game. There's a gaming mat as well, like a paper gaming mat, which is folded up inside there to get you started as well, which absolutely allows you to get playing straight away. There is punch out tokens like terrain as well. So there's cards for things like sort of walls or for fences or for sort of barricades or forest or that type of stuff. There's all the bases for your models as well. And plus the ambush cards as well that you need for each of the different units. So each unit has its own card with all of the stats on. So you're not constantly referring back to the rule book to see what the models can actually do or what the units can do. And their keywords that they have as well are on these cards with an explanation of what that keyword does. So again, you're not referring back to the rule book until you get your first few games under your belt and they all become second nature. So there's a whole host of stuff inside this, but it absolutely gives you everything you need.
I might just jump in quickly because some people, about the tokens, some people might be having flashbacks to Vanguard because that did involve a lot of tokens. So don't worry, these aren't that sort of tokens. There aren't lots of different like states or things like knocked down or anything like that. It's more, these are just very simple references for things like the objectives or wounds, which actually you can put on the cards if you want. And yeah, that's a really good important point about the cards is they have all the special abilities on. So say if your character has got elite, that's described on the card. And again, that was to help make it that was actually one of the suggestions Andy had from playtesting. Really, is to make it as streamlined as possible, so you're not having to go back to the rule book all the time. So you can just immerse yourself in the game rather than keep going back.
Yeah.
Speaking of playtesters, that's one of the questions I have on my list here. So I'm assuming this was playtested, and I don't remember seeing a call for playtesters. So very, very interesting. So
yeah, there was it was quite cryptic. There was quite a cryptic call for playtest. So there's been quite a bit of playtesting. There was a full day at Mantic as well, and then some more with the Mantic staff. So yeah, there has been some playtesting that's gone on, and obviously, you know, the rules are based on Kings of War, which is an existing rule set, which is, you know, that's been tested very, very heavily. So, you know, we're looking at this one, the testing, to make sure, but I think it makes sure as well people are having fun with the format. You know, I guess that's one worry is, was it making it this small? Would that sort of take away some of that Kings of War DNA? But it didn't actually. Actually, people really enjoyed it. And the fact it was so quick, I mean, even like on the playtest days, and people were just learning, games were sort of 45 minutes to an hour. So it is nice and quick. And again, you know, you could get a few games in an evening if you're at the gaming club. I think that's a nice potential, you know, idea for it.
Oh, 45 minutes to an hour is perfect. That's for the time crunched people out there in the world. That is definitely a sweet spot for sure. So now,
actually, sorry, Mark. So I was going to say, like, time crunch is a really good thing. Actually, you mentioned there. This is ideal, really, for those people who may not have all the time to play, who may not have all the time to put their miniatures together, or even like have time to like spend ages army listing. You know, this is again like, if you want a really quick sort of rank and flank game, or even like just a war game that you want to get on the table, then sort of Champions hopefully ticks those kind of boxes.
There you go. I've got two quick questions here too. So, will we get an annual update like Kings of War for it, or is it just going to be static? Do you envision that the companies getting rebalanced?
It's a good question. I mean, we've got, so all of the, I would say that there's 9 different champions that are due to come out in 2025, and all of those champions have been play tested. They've all been balanced sort of from day one. So we don't envisage that we will need to do a lot of rebalancing. And in terms of
famous last words there, Andy.
Yeah, I know. I'm putting my bits on the chopping block here, aren't I, saying that kind of thing. But we don't see it as a hugely competitive game in terms of sort of tournament list building and stuff, because there isn't any list building. So there's an element of fun being the most important part of this. That said, if anything needs a little bit of a rata or anything like that, we'll still be monitoring that. But at this stage, we're not looking at it in terms of it needs like overhauls in list building, because what we're not doing is we're not just releasing sort of two factions and then sort of 6 months down the line releasing something else that hasn't been played against those from day one.
Oh, very cool. Well, you mentioned it sounds like we're going to get 9 companies out of it. So, I mean, and you know this is going to come up as Champions tournaments. You know, maybe we have Clash of Heroes or something like that. So, yeah, as opposed to Clash of Kings. But is part of the design element anticipating that?
I mean, it absolutely can be played as a tournament game. There's no like any game can be played as a tournament game. And it's designed to be fast playing and balanced and fun, which are the most important things. But we're not thinking about this. Like, we're not designing it to be the tournament game, if you like, if that makes sense. But it absolutely can be played under kind of tournament sort of conditions.
Oh, very cool. Well, it sounds like it's going to fall into the same type of category as Dungeon Saga Origins, kind of, you know, with the family type of thing, a little bit more rank and flank experience as opposed to dungeon diving.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like not necessarily my first war game, but sort of it is that sort of thing. And for me, because again, I'm going to go back to my boys. They've always sort of been, I guess, curious about Kings of War. They've always seen me playing or seen me painting thousands and thousands of goblins, and sort of been interested in playing. But then I think it was always the scale of what they needed to actually paint and build that sort of put them off. But for this one, it's more like, they can kind of get it because they're sort of like, I only have to do 25 to 30 models. Well, that's maybe an afternoon or something like that. So I definitely think that will be helpful. That it'll be a lot easier for them to get into.
There's a lot of things that we as experienced wargamers take for granted. And I think if you think about, if you're somebody that is maybe has a bit less time on your hands these days, or a bit less space, and you're looking at tabletop wargaming and you like the fantasy rank and flank, but if you think about it, you from day one you need to learn to be a modeler and learn how to assemble miniatures. You need to learn how to be a painter and learn how to paint miniatures. You need to learn how to be a tactical list builder and understand how do I put an army together. And then you also need to learn how to play the game as well on top of that. And that can be quite a lot to take in if this is your first steps into wargaming, really. And I don't think there's necessarily many game systems out there that really do kind of sort of like lead you by the hand a little bit. And I think what Champions does is you don't have to worry about how to build the models because we're going to tell you the instructions are inside the box. You don't need to worry about how to list build because there isn't any list building in this. And the rules are really accessible. So for me, I would say personally, this is the most accessible rank and flank game that there's ever been.
Wow, that just sounds super exciting for me. So I've got another question.
Sure.
Just to make sure to see if Danny Graves is going to be playing Champions or not. Does it use command dice?
Only for Danny. We've actually done a special expansion.
We've just got the Danny Graves edition.
It's only sort of no. Actually, it's interesting you sort of mentioned the command dice. Is when initially we sort of I was talking about Champions with Matt Gilbert, and to begin with, we did consider putting the command dice in, but actually. I think what I was really worried about is it could be so swingy at this sort of small scale that, because you've only got maybe four or five units on the table, that if you get a good roll and your opponent gets a really bad roll, it would kind of potentially scupper you and leave a bit of a bad taste in your mouth. So instead, and Andy, I assume I'm all right to sort of describe how faction orders work.
Yeah, I was thinking this was a perfect time to talk about. I was going to say one of the most exciting parts of Champions. We haven't spoke about it yet, so yeah, absolutely, mate. Share away.
So instead of like the command dice being random, you've actually got three faction orders. So each sort of faction has their own unique abilities that are sort of not that can be just done by them, but it might give them a little bit of a boost or something like that. So what happens is each round you can issue one order to each unit. So say if you want to give them a little boost in combat or you want to give them a little bit of an extra move, you have like a champions phase, it's called, which is at the start of the round, you sort of secretly put out these commands on each unit, and then you flip them over once you've both put them on to reveal what they are. So it might be that someone gets brutal, or their nerve increases or something like that, and it only lasts that round. So there's quite a nice element there because it's a little bit of extra currency that you can use. And I think because the game is played at such a small level, this gives it kind of a little bit of extra spice that you can kind of help a unit maybe kind of be a bit more powerful in combat or maybe be a bit more defensive. So yeah, the kind of faction orders have replaced the idea of command dice, and I think it's a lot fairer this way because you both have access to the same amount. You've both got three, and that means one player is not going to spike it by having a really good roll compared to their opponent.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it's like your opponent will get to know what your faction orders are, what your special orders are for your army, but they won't know which unit you're going to give them to. And there's some strategy in that. There's the secrecy of I've put my faction orders out, but you don't know which unit I've given what to. And you can also use you can choose to not put one of your faction orders out as well, and use them as a nerve re-roll as well. So if for example, as the battle goes on, you might find there's this particular order isn't that useful this turn. Don't put that order out. You can keep that back and use that to re-roll a nerve test as well. So there's some nice little abilities to that. And then don't forget as well that each of the different champions and their companies that they come with, each of those different champions all have different faction orders as well. So that's something that gives each of the different companies a different flavour and a different way to play.
Oh, very, very cool. So you kind of mentioned 9 companies coming out. So we're going to get the range. We'll probably get the new plastics in that, it sounds like, and then they'll drift into Kings of War. So what's the release schedule like? Do we think we'll get all 9 this year, or I have to start putting money away, Andy? That's
so the plan is that assuming that nothing goes wrong, which it shouldn't because it's been well planned out, all 9 will be available this year. So the release schedule will be, this releases in April. I haven't mentioned that yet. So the plan is this comes out in April. So we're in March now already. So next month you'll be able to get this in your home. And at release, at launch, there will be the 2-player set, which will be Basilean and Force of the Abyss, so the Bloody Cardinal and Alana Slustris. That will be the 2. And then there'll also be 2 more companies as well coming out that month. He says, looking at his sheet, so I don't make the mistake and get this wrong. There'll be 2 more coming out that month as well. There is the Northern Alliance one, which will be Jordan Tallinson. And there will also be the Twilight Kin, which is the Void Heart as well, box set as well. So at launch there will be 4 different factions. So that's Basileans, Forces of the Abyss, Northern Alliance, and Twilight Kin. And then from that point on through the rest of the year, we'll release a new one every month. So that basically every month there'll be a new faction coming that you can then pick up and add to your roster of factions that you want to play.
Rob, are there any other rules you might want to hit us with? It sounds like you have a rule book over there.
Yeah, I'm not going to, I won't go through everything that's kind of going on in the rule book or all the changes. But to give you a little sort of taster, as we've kind of been mentioning throughout, we wanted this to be a streamlined, a quick experience that people can pick up and play, in a day, something like that, very quickly. So with that in mind, although the core rules are based on Kings of War, big Kings of War, we did have a look through and see where there were some of the rules that maybe were a little bit overly complex or, had the potential for people to get them confused or mixed up as well. So it does mean that we've kind of taken out some of the more potentially confusing elements, I guess, of Kings of War. So one of the things is because this is typically an infantry level game. There are no dragons or, big war machines or kind of giants, that sort of thing. Something that has gone is height. We took height out because we thought, well, it is one thing. It's quite abstract. Maybe it slows down the game as you're working out whether someone can see another unit or something like that. And also we just didn't think it was needed with the kind of the small units. So yeah, that's one thing that's gone. And then that means that we've cleaned up cover a little bit, so it's a little bit simpler. So yeah, I mean that's sort of one of the top level things that has been changed compared to big Kings of War, I guess.
So speaking of rules, is there a rules committee or?
No, not at the minute. So typically, well, I don't know, Andy, if you know, but typically what will happen is for games, the rules committee comes afterwards, and Andy's sort of spoken a little bit. Obviously, it's been play tested and that sort of thing. It may be in the future, I guess, if it is one of those ones that becomes like tournament heavy or something like that, then maybe that's when the rules committee becomes involved. But at the minute, no.
Yeah, I think it's what, as Rob says, it's generally something that comes after a game has been released. But the fact that this is quite unique in the fact that we've play tested everything that is releasing this year. So everything has been balanced against each other intentionally because of the way the game works. And so there may be some tweaks that we need to do, but again, it's not necessarily something that needs a full committee of people to be sort of constantly reassessing things, I think. But then again, once it's out there and people are playing it, no doubt we'll get some feedback as well. So.
Oh, very, very cool. So when can we play some games? Are we going to be jealous of everyone at Adepticon that you'll be demoing Champions at Adepticon this year? Or
I'm pretty certain Champions is being demoed at Adepticon, but it actually comes out in April as well, so we're not too long to wait. So it's out next month. As I mentioned before, we'll have the 2-player set with the Basileans and the Forces of the Abyss in there. We'll also have the 2 other boxes that I mentioned as well, Northern Alliance and the Twilight Kin. If you just want to, if the 2-player set's not for you, or your friends pick up a 2-player set and you just want to pick up a faction, you can just pick up one of those faction boxes. You can also pick up the rulebook separately as well, which comes with the tokens as well. So if you're just wanting to pick up the rulebook and tokens, you can get that. And we're also releasing as well, alongside those, a deluxe double-sided neoprene mat, which I have to say looks absolutely fantastic. And we're also releasing some kind of deluxe 3D terrain as well. So in the 2-player set, you will have punch-out terrain to be able to put onto your board in terms of things like blocking sort of walls and forests and that kind of thing. But if you really want to make your game look a bit cooler, you can buy the 3D terrain. And what's really cool about it is if you have the card terrain, you can still put that down on your mat, put the 3D terrain on top of it, and then once your units come together and start to kind of battle, you might want to remove the 3D part and leave the kind of 2-dimensional card underneath it, so it marks where your terrain is without getting in the way of sort of the 2 bits battling together as well. So it makes it very playable.
so when will we be able to pre-order, advance order, etc.?
I think pre-orders will be obviously going up at some point this month. I think I've been on holiday for the last week, so I don't want to say anything in case it's changed. But the pre-orders will be going up very soon. If not, by the time you're hearing this, the pre-orders might already be up.
Yes, I just want to make sure Mark teases you guys about where the name Kings of War Champions came from, because it's something we mooted on the podcast about a year and a half ago, which was basically Dead Zone in Panathor, but we called it Kings of War Champions.
Actually, I could be really cruel and say, Chris, you assume that someone's listening to the podcast at Mantic.
There you go. That's not cruel, Rob. That's accurate. So where did the name Kings of War Champions come from?
I can be totally honest. I have no idea. I think what happened was, our studio was banding around a few different names. We were trying to it needed to be something evocative around the heroes, because what we're trying to get across is the fact that this is like a hero's journey. This is the champion's journey. This is like, it's the story, the backstory of those individuals and the people that they are with, those individual units as well. So we were banding around a few different ideas, and Champions was the one that just seemed to kind of feel fitted best. But I must admit, I don't know who came up with the original suggestion, and maybe it was osmosis from the podcast, maybe, but it wasn't me. I know that.
I think it was actually Andy and Kyle and Ronnie.
There you go. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were on a trip together somewhere, and they were talking about it. Because it's funny, actually, Andy, I can't even remember, because for a long time it had a totally different name. It was still Kings of War something.
Yes.
But then I think sort of while they were away together, they sort of were talking about it, and obviously were talking about how important these heroes were, and they were thinking, well, actually, maybe that would be a good name for it, is to emphasize that. So actually that influenced, because I think originally they were just called leaders or heroes, so then they became champions, and then the champion phase came in. So it's quite nice, actually, to sort of give it an identity that then runs through the game rules as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned about 5 units. I play 500 points and have since first edition. And it's typically 4 to 5 units. So this is right in my wheelhouse. I'm very excited about it. And as you mentioned before, everything's kind of fixed. So it does take out the stress of trying to build a list and things like that. So I guess that brings up, is this going to be up on the companion at all? Or so you could print that out, or everything's in the box and you've solved the proprietary model thing, like a third-party model question that Kings of War has always suffered with.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the companion, the early, if I think about it from the early days, there's no real need for it to be in the companion in terms of list building, because there isn't any list building. But that's not to say that it won't come to the companion as somewhere as a repository for rules and for stats and things like that. But certainly, I don't think that there's a plan for it to be there from day one. The idea is if you play the game, you buy the game, the rules are inside the box, or you buy the rules separately, and all of the stat cards and everything with all of the stats on are inside the factions that you purchase. I was going to say the other thing as well is because you mentioned small scale games and things as well, like Ambush. This is not really designed to replace Ambush either. So I know some people's maybe question or maybe worry was, does this mean Ambush kind of gets sidelined or anything like that? Ambush is still its own thing. Ambush is still small scale Kings of War with list building and options and the ability to kind of play smaller games with stuff. If you've got a bigger army and you want to play a small game, you can still play Ambush. It's still there. So this is not intended to replace Ambush. It's intended to be a standalone Kings of War Champions game that you can. It might end up being a foot in the door to full scale, but it's not intended to replace Ambush.
Well, we kind of mentioned Vanguard used to be the gateway into Kings of War. So I guess maybe in a way this is replacing Vanguard from that. Not that it's a skirmish game, but this is your intro to Kings of War.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, if you don't mind, Andy, I'll just mention that with Vanguard. I think sort of in hindsight, Vanguard was kind of pitched as that intro to Kings of War, but actually the rules were just completely, it was a totally different game. I think sort of in hindsight, it probably shouldn't have been pitched in that way. It should have just been a Panathor skirmish game with miniatures that you can also use in Kings of War. I think that was a slight problem. So yes, this one is more like that sort of have a go at rank and flank gaming, and if you like what you see and want a bit more sort of in-depth rules, or you like the idea of lists building, then you can move up to Ambush or to Kings of War. I think that's the difference here, is that it's, I don't know, it's not really a replacement for Vanguard, but it is a replacement, I would say, for that intro to rank and flank gaming, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that in the future, there's no reason why a replacement to Vanguard couldn't come along. There's no reason why we couldn't have a skirmish game set in Panathor to come back. But this isn't meant to be the replacement for either Ambush or for Vanguard.
Very, very cool. Are we going to be encouraging people to paint those armies? Is there going to be like a color palette that's suggested? That's one of the tricky things, too, is what color am I painting my guys? So...
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously going to encourage people to do it. What we want to do is we want to try and focus on the hobby aspect of this as much as the gaming side of it as well. Like, I think what really shows off Kings of War is when you see those big armies and when you see those multi-based kind of dioramas. And if people can see that as a more manageable entry point with Kings of War champions in terms of learning to do those multi-based units and not having to do so many of them, I think we'll really start to see the kind of the gaming community sort of taking that hobby aspect onto a different level beyond what even we can think of.
Oh, absolutely. Because, when I go to the hobby shop when they were playing Kings of War here locally, there were a lot of gray models, blue tack to bases. So that was, I remember seeing one model tacked in the middle of a base at one time. So that's why I ask, you mentioned the Christmas morning, you're going to pull this out. Rob mentioned blue tack. So, what's the anticipation there? That's why I wanted to know.
Yeah, I think just what you're mentioning there as well is it's the hesitation sometimes of where do I start with those bigger scale games, and that's why you get a lot of grey models and maybe stuff blue tack to bases, is because there's the idea of, am I going to spend the time painting this unit and then never use it because it doesn't do what I think it does in the game kind of thing. Where with Champions, what you have in the box is what you are going to play with, so there's no hesitation, and you can't build it the wrong way because you build it the way it's designed to be done. You can't put the wrong unit into your list. You can't spend ages painting a model that then never sees the table, because what you get is what you use.
Oh, very cool. So who do we thank for this brainchild? Who kind of came up with we got to have something in this space? And Vanguard wasn't doing it, and Ambush is a little too big. So is there a person who really pushed this particular concept, or?
Well,
I was going to say Rob, but you probably know better than me.
So I think it was sort of it was something from what I could tell that Matt and Ronnie had been speaking about. This idea that they wanted, obviously to get as many people into the world of Panathor as possible, and there's different ways to do it, and obviously Dungeon Saga does it one way, and I think this is another sort of way to approach it, like a proper war game. So they were looking at a small scale game in that kind of space, and that's how it all sort of started out. And then they kind of mentioned it to me and said, would I be interested in getting involved as well, because I'd been doing some other bits and bobs in terms of games design in the background. You've got to thank Ronnie and Matt for this one.
Thank you, Ronnie and Matt. I'm excited about this. So it's very, very cool. I think it's going to be a great entry point for people. And, we've always been looking for that way to get into Kings of War, and it's been kind of a hole in the market, I think. So hopefully everyone will be excited about it. So, all right. Well, as Chris mentioned before, your time is very valuable. So is there anything we left unsaid? Anything we want to cover before we say goodbye today?
No, I think we've covered everything from my side of things. I've no doubt as we get closer, we'll chat a bit more as well. And once you understand it, because I appreciate that you've kind of had these questions not knowing anything all about this game. So now you know a bit more about it. I'll let it percolate a little bit, and then we can always chat again near the launch.
Oh, it's percolating, let me tell you. I'm looking forward to seeing the rules come out and having you guys back once we can get our arms around the rules a little bit. And here on MUP, we have little specialty shows based around games. So I'm looking forward to hosting MUP Champions. So very, very cool. Yeah, I mean, this is right in my wheelhouse, guys. Very, very excited about it. So
glad to hear it.
All right. Well, I can't wait. You guys are welcome back anytime. All you have to do, you know how to get a hold of me, and we'll get you all scheduled and get you on here. And folks, very excited about Champions, very much so. And as we mentioned before, maybe this will be that Friday night game we're always looking for. We always talk about Armada, Dead Zone. Maybe Champions is that little mini tournament we do on Friday nights at tournaments, and then we roll into the big Kings of War game. So very, very exciting. Well, thank you very much, Andy and Rob, taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today.
No problem.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
All right, folks. And until next time, take care.